It's preparing to live stream, setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. Redirecting. Okay.
So the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah. Oh my God. See, I'm here. Okay. It's preparing to live stream, setting up your meeting for YouTube Live. Redirecting. Okay.
So the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're live on YouTube. Yeah. Oh my God. See, I'm here. This is so weird. Okay. It's preparing to live stream, setting up your YouTube Live. Redirecting. Okay.
So the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're live on YouTube. Yeah. Oh my God. See, I'm here. This is so weird. Okay, I think we call it. Preparing to live stream, setting up your YouTube Live. Redirecting. Okay.
So the meeting is now streaming live on YouTube.
Yeah. Live on YouTube. Yeah. Oh my God, see, I'm here. Okay, I think I just needed to shut that off. Okay, I think we're good now.
Yeah, it does say it's still recording live on YouTube.
Yeah, so I think what happened was I pressed another button which opened up the YouTube screen. So it was playing as we're talking here. There's a delay, so then it was playing there. So, oh my gosh. Guys, please, anybody that's watching this, bear with us because we have been trying to figure this out for like an hour or at least 35 minutes trying to go live on some platform, right? So I am Keisha Nicole of the Oh Hell No podcast, and tonight I have Chris Shaver. Chris is the couples whisperer. He helps couples, work on their relationships and get things right. He helps them identify areas where there might be some weaknesses or areas where they can, make things better. And he does this in a very special way. He has an assessment, and that is kind of the basis of where he gets some of his information and how he goes about working with, clients. So welcome back to this is your first time on the Oh Hell No podcast because Chris was a guest on Side Talk. His episode is not live yet, but I am definitely going to post that episode this weekend so you guys can check it out. So welcome to the Oh Hell No podcast, Chris.
So nice to be here, Keisha. It was such a long journey.
I know. Guys, you don't know. We were on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, trying to go live. Okay. This is like crazy, but we made it.
We're live. Ta-da.
We are live. So Chris has this assessment. It's called the Berkman assessment. So Chris, can you tell people high level what a Berkman assessment is?
The Berkman assessment comes out of something called the Berkman method. And super high level, 1948, a relative genius, name of Roger Berkman, did some empirical research, studied real human beings who had been involved in close personal relationships for 10 years or more. And the intent of the study was to find out why our behavior changes when we get angry or upset. In other words, are there definable triggers? And he found them. And it expresses as, I call it 22 pairs of opposite behaviors, but there's 9 behaviors, a number of which we're going to talk about tonight. We did an assessment for you, and we're going to go through your results on one report. There's also 10 interests, which can be quite opposite. People can have strong interest and antipathies. So I call those opposites. And then there's four attitudinal scores, which can kind of seem to get down in the weeds, but they show up every day too. So there's 22 things that show up every day in a relationship. Berkman measures these things explicitly, and the results are what we're going to go through. Before we go through the results, Keisha, Nicole, what I really want to know is what you thought of taking the assessment, because that's an experience unto itself for most people.
So when I took the assessment, I kind of felt like, okay, why do you keep asking me the same questions over and over again? And then I also felt like, as I was answering some of these questions, it was like, yes or no, or it seemed very black and white. And in some instances, I feel like it's not black or white. It could be some people, or, but it was the way the question was set up. It was just kind of like, you had to just go with something. So I was wondering, is this really going to give an accurate assessment of, me in these areas that we're looking for? So I'm very interested to see what the results are. And I'm pretty self-aware. So I think I will be able to honestly say yay or nay.
Okay, and so we're doing this live without a net. You've never seen your results before. You took the assessment, you have that experience. Your expectation is that from taking that you think it's going to tell you anything about yourself?
That I'm a little crazy. I don't know. It should be interesting. I'm very excited to see what this test says about me, because I know there are some areas that need some work. So I am ready.
Okay. So the report that I pulled out of this, there's a lot of reports you can pull out of a Berkman assessment, but the one that I'm bringing to market first to help couples. I've been helping couples for the past 10 years, but it's more like people who come to me whose marriages typically are in trouble, and we do a very deep dive into their personalities and what you're looking at, generally speaking, when couples fall out, when they're, let's put it this way, there are tragic mistakes, which cheating on your spouse, financial infidelity, abuse of any kind, addiction of any kind, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. Those are the tragic mistakes from which a marriage or relationship has an almost impossible hill to climb to recover. And that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a report that's called The Biggest Mistakes You Can Make with Each Other, your spouse or your partner. And so the biggest mistakes are behavioral mistakes, and people make them over and over again. But Berkman, in defining these 22 pairs of opposite behaviors, there's actually 22 categories of behavior. And what's really interesting is when you get into the brain research, a significant portion of our brain is uh, is assigned to understanding the world categorically, right? So categories happen to be a marvelous way of understanding complex things. The human mind breaks it down. And so we're going to talk about 9 categories of behavior tonight. And actually, 7 of these are the biggest mistakes that your spouse could make with you. And that's it. Each one of these categories is expressed as a pair of opposite behaviors. So the
So
first one,
this, wait, let me just make sure I understand. So what you're able to pull out of my assessment is what my spouse should not do or should avoid doing with me.
yes, these are your triggers. These are the biggest mistakes that your husband, whatever,
Yes,
yes, your husband could make with you. And the first category is one-to-one communication, and there are the pairs of opposites. Berkman measures your behaviors. It measures what you need from your spouse. In other words, your behavior, I often say about me, if I met me, I might not like me because there are certain of my behaviors that don't meet my needs, how I want to be treated. So sometimes people say, oh, you can dish it out, but you can't take it. So personality is complicated, right? Is anyway, so the first behavior, the first category is one-to-one communication, and there's 2 sides to this. There's very direct, straight from the straight from the cuff, one-to-one communication, and then there's tactful, diplomatic, respectful, coming at you softly. And so the biggest mistake your husband could make with you would be being too direct, which would appear discourteous or thoughtless with you. And so that would be a major trigger for you. True or false?
Yes. So if he is like abrasive or like not, if he comes at me like crazy, like like just says something without kind of, I guess maybe, I don't want to say that I need to be like coddled or spoon fed information, because I like directness, but I like it to come with a spoonful of sugar as well. You know, it doesn't have to be like
Well, that and
nasty.
that's actually how I describe it to couples. And I say put a little butter on the toast, right? Don't just say, "Hey, give me the screwdriver." It's like, "Hey, hon, if you got a second, I know you're really busy, but could you hand me the screwdriver, please? It's a little softer." I mean, that's just a simple example, but is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's the abruptness, and so people don't think of this is a real category of behaviors. Direct. There's a wonderful movie. It's an old movie. It's called On Golden Pond, and Jane Fonda was the movie star in it. Henry Fonda plays this cranky old guy who is as direct and blunt as a human being could ever be, and it's a wonderful movie to watch if people don't understand the behavioral opposites. But that thing of, you're his wife, you're making all these contributions to relationship. You have your own thing going on. You have status, in the world at large, and if somebody comes at you bluntly, it just feels disrespectful. Does that feel on?
Yeah. No, yeah, I do feel that, and I do agree with that. I don't like when my husband talks to me roughly. And I won't reveal too much about myself because I want you to continue, and then maybe if you hit another place, then I'll say this other thing about myself. But yeah, I don't like it when he's too rough with me. Like, he is a very mild mannered person, and he usually doesn't raise his voice. He can get his point across without raising his voice, and he doesn't like yelling. But whenever he, says something to me like abruptly, it really,
It's the abruptness. It's the abruptness
yeah.
is very direct. And so that abruptness is one of the characteristics of direct communication. So people who are doing that, there's this pair of opposites. People who are direct are very task focused. It's just a task to them, and
Mhm.
I'm more direct than I need from other people. And so when I'm being direct, I have to stop and say, hey, there's a human being on the other side. Ask them how they're doing, right? See what's going on before you dive in, because otherwise my task focused brain is like, hey, can you give me the screwdriver? And you don't think anything of it, but it's like the person at the other end might be like, do you see I'm doing something? Like, I'm bleeding
Yeah.
here. I'm putting a band-aid on, like whatever. It's like, pay attention to me a little bit. So yeah,
Okay.
that quality of abruptness is part of what people who need the opposite would express or experience. It's like, wow, that's just like too much, too frank, too hard. So,
Okay.
all
I
right.
like it. That's good, Chris. Number one is accurate.
Okay, so I'm going to bring this in. I'm not going to do it in sort of the order of the report, but kind of related but different is you need your husband to pay attention to what you're feeling as well as what you're saying, right? And so the pair of opposites here, we're talking about emotional energy. So you have a need for people to talk about, to consider your feelings. Your feelings are an important part of the mix. The people on the opposite end of the scale, it's just the facts. Just give it, and that can come along. Often it comes along with just give it to me straight, means, give it to me directly and blunt. Don't worry about my feelings. Those two go hand in hand. But you have the opposite sort of thing, which is come at me softly and make sure you're paying attention to my feelings at the same time. My feelings aren't nothing. They're very much a something. Is that on point for you?
Yes, I definitely do want people to pay attention to my feelings. Right. If I'm feeling something, I usually share it with people. So if you're giving me some funny energy or vibes, I'm going to tell you, hey, you've been a little off lately. Is everything okay? I'm feeling some type of energy, and this is what I'm feeling from you. Or if I come home and I say, I'm feeling very tired, I am going to lay down. I don't like it when my husband assumes that I'm being a baby or I'm overreacting. If I say I don't feel good, I think I need to go to the doctor. Don't call me a hypochondriac. Like, respect my feelings. So, yes, Chris, number two is on point.
Okay. Now, the third
Mm,
one, I'm just gonna hop around because this one is related to actually something you just said, maybe a little bit. It certainly brought to me, but the biggest mistake would be, and Berkman is written in business language. Most of the Berkman organization's clients are Fortune 100 companies. It's for the biggest and best businesses on earth that use this. So I'm translating into couples' languages this language of business. But the report says the biggest mistake would be measuring your report, your performance by watching how busy you are. But what we're actually talking about is your physical energy. So even though you may, and again, people can need one thing, one side of the opposite, but and their behavior could be the other. So you could be um, quite busy in your approach in the world, but you don't have endless physical energy. And when you're and so because your need is uh, to mind that not unlimited supply of energy. Your need is to pour thought energy into something before you do it. So you're not going to be the one who's going to, go head first, headlong into an activity 100 miles an hour and say, "Oh, if it doesn't work, we'll fix it later." Or, you're not an endless ball of energy. So your approach would be think first and then act in a measured way after you've thought it through. So somebody in a business setting, somebody who managed you, who would say like, "You're sitting around doing nothing," you'd be like, "No, I'm sitting around thinking about it to figure out what to do so I don't waste energy." But in a home life, in a home setting, where this can be a challenge, is if you're married to somebody who's got endless high energy, who sees the world through, take action first, they can judge you and say, I'm doing all this stuff and you're doing nothing. And you're like, no, what I do actually works. You're you're running in circles. So I don't know if that's an issue in your marriage, but does that sound on point for you?
well, I do a lot, right? So, I'm constantly moving, I'm constantly busy, I'm constantly doing things. Sometimes he's like, you need to sit down, you're doing too much. But what I will tell you is that sometimes when we're doing an activity together, like putting something together, we might get into an argument because I like to take my time and study the layout or whatever it is that we have. And it might take me a little bit longer. And he's like, just give me that thing right there. Why are you doing that? And I'm like, just wait a minute. I'm looking at the whole thing to make sure that this is correct or we're putting this in the right place. Right. So I think that is where that comes into play between us is we're doing projects together. I tend to want to like take time to do certain things and he thinks I'm wasting time and not, jumping
Right.
right in.
So the effect on your personality is that you would say it's measured. You're not just gonna spin in circles, try this, try this, try this. It's like I'm gonna think my way through this before I do it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, let's look at this first and think about it and blah, 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 and plan it out or whatever. And sometimes it annoys him.
right. So the tension of opposing forces that occurs is people who are more measured are, let's think about it first. People who have that much physical energy are try something, we'll fix it, but it doesn't work. Try it again, try something new, try some, and you're like, well, I'm not doing that.
Right. Definitely don't want to do that.
Right. So related, these things all link together, and this is the way personality works. But it's related, but it's actually an extension of this because physical energy is one place where thought energy appears. But Berkman also measures a category of behavior that they just call thought. Now, people on the lower end of that scale, and it usually works this way, people with high energy, high physical energy, are instant decision makers. So those two go together. But the same way, it's typical that people with lower physical energy, their need is for less, um, are are they can see the gray areas. So and they need to think things through entirely. They see gray area, they see complexity, where people who are instant decision makers just they're so busy rushing around they don't see it. So you have a very high need to think things through, and there's all kinds of ways that could play out. Part of it is emotionally. You could see emotional pitfalls and things, but so anybody who would push you to make up your mind quickly would be making a big mistake with you. So the pace of your making forming decisions is relatively slow compared to somebody who's going to be rushing around and instant decision making. Does that make sense for you?
Yeah, and some things I do take time to make my mind up, and sometimes I can be a little indecisive on things. Yeah, and I do think about stuff a lot. Maybe over,
Well, that would be it.
yeah, overthink sometimes, but yeah.
And if there's an emotional component to it, it would express as worrying.
Hmm.
And are you a worrier?
Um, I try not to be, really, honestly. I try not to worry too much about stuff.
Okay.
Um, but I might think about something for a long time. It might play over and over in my head, which I guess maybe you could look at that. I don't know if that's worrying or just reliving.
Can you
Um,
give me an example of that? Let's make it real so people can understand what you're talking about.
so like if I had, let's say I had a situation at work where I was doing a presentation or something and I stumbled on a fact or something. Um, and the presentation is over. I did my job. I'll think about it over and over, like, damn, I should have said this, or maybe if I would have done this at that moment, that wouldn't have happened, or maybe I should like. I just don't let it go. Like, okay, that happened. It's over. You did the presentation. Good job. Move on. Like, it kind of lives in my head, and I'm like thinking about it like a week later or 2 weeks later, like, you know.
Well, and that's well, there's three things there. One is that not on this report, but the one thing is the emotional state of that error, that error, making an error in public created in you,
Hmm.
um, created this emotional tension, and now you're in this thought loop where you just keep going around the block with it,
Right.
re-examining it. The third thing, which isn't in this biggest mistakes report, there is that um, there's image man. Berkman does measure something called image management, and the scale is a interesting scale because out of all this stuff, it's sort of metadata, like it expresses um, uh, how you see yourself versus other people, and how we see ourselves versus other people. If you're attempting to be perfect, you hold yourself in high regard. You're trying to show up as the best possible version of yourself, and
Hmm.
without getting too deep in the weeds, if you make a mistake, that's what this hit to self, this you know your own you know innocent gaffe turns into like, oh, self, my image has sort of got a crack in it. and it's hard to manage that because you're putting a lot of, it sounds like you're putting a lot of energy into showing up as your best self. Are you very self-critical or not super self-critical?
I think I'm somewhere in the middle. No, I'm very self-critical. What the hell? Yeah.
That's what it
Chris,
sounds like to me. If you're still thinking about
wait.
it, if you're still thinking about it 2 weeks later, there's a lot of internal pressure for you to show up um, as as your best self, and if you don't, then that's that sort of dynamic that happens internally. But
Yes.
again, this is part of. But what I'm interested in is maybe there's a different an at-home example of maybe of you and your husband make up your minds at about the same speed or different speeds on like say a big purchase like a car or
Hmm.
house or um
What? Oh, how do we decide?
I mean at what speed because what we're talking about here is the
Oh,
speed.
see, it depends because sometimes I can make a decision like quickly. Like if I feel strongly about something, I'm like, this is what I want to do. I'm very confident about my decision and I want to do this. And in those moments, he's the opposite, right? He's dragging his feet. And then
Okay.
sometimes when he makes decisions on certain things, like, like this is what I want to do, then I'm like, well, did you think about this? Are you sure that's what you want to do? Blah, blah, blah. So it just really depends. And then sometimes we're at the same place, where we're both like, yep, that's the best decision. Sorry, guys, that was a gnat.
Yeah, it,
It,
it is
yeah,
interesting because it's interesting because what the research found was that there are places where we're very clear in what we need and but it there's this great it sort of expresses this bell curve and in this great middle area things are situational and conditional
right.
so it's just in this case you know if that happens I can make up my mind up fast it's an area where I'm familiar with I don't have to think about it but if something else happens with has a lot more implications then I know I'm going to have a lot of thought about it that's kind of what I heard you say
Yeah.
okay um so next uh the next biggest mistake your husband could make with you would be forcing you to participate unnecessarily in group activities. And what that's actually talking about, and this sounds like from is you it's we're talking about social energy and and what it's stating is that you don't have unlimited social energy. Like we were talking about physical energy. So
Mhm.
people with that characteristic typically are not fond of large groups. Your MO would be one-on-one, two-on-two. Um, Not a big fan of being out there in the faceless group and knocking around with mindless chatter. So it just
Ding, 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 Chris. That is 100% on point. I do not like large groups. I just don't. I don't like the energy that comes out of it. Um, Now, I will go to an event where there is a large group of people. I'm fine being in that, but I don't want to have like a large friend group where I've got like 50 different females that I'm trying to wrangle and be friends with and hang out with all at one time. And like, I don't have the energy for that. I just don't. I don't like small talk, unnecessary chatter. Like I just don't. So yeah, that is so good and so on point.
right. And so that is the difference between having not a lower amount of social energy versus higher amount. People with higher amounts, I have a good friend. Um, she's in 7 groups, social groups. She's retired, and
Mhm.
7 social groups. Each of the social groups has 8 to 12 people, and they meet once or twice a week. And so her batteries just keep getting recharged, recharged, recharged by being around a lot of people. people with
Yeah.
lower social energy, it's just like, I need to go home and just hang out alone, or I'll, you can be with me, but that's it, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Um, and are you and your husband in sync along those lines, or is he more social than you?
No. He's very quiet. It's funny because if we're out, I will, converse with people and I do a podcast. So I do like people and I like talking to people, but I like intimate settings. I like intimate situations where the conversations are authentic and meaningful. I just don't, like I said, I don't mind going out. Like if you are my friend and you have a bunch of friends and you invite me out and that's your setup, I'm fine with going, but that's never going to be like my life. You're not going to come to my house and there's going to be like 200 people here hanging out and they're all my best friends. Like, no,
Right.
it's not going
All right.
to.
So,
And
next, you
he's
were,
like that too. Sorry. He's like that too.
oh, yeah, okay. And so these would be things that couples could fight about, right? I mean, if you've got one who's very social and the other one who's like, we need to be real small group here, uh,
Yes.
they end up being, I have one of my first clients, got divorced, her first divorce, one of two, and it was, she came home and all her husband's friends were there, and she said, this was long before she knew about Berkman. She walked in the door and she said, "This is never going to change." And I asked him for a divorce that night.
Yep.
So the rubber meets the road along these things. These are serious as a heart attack kind of thing.
Yeah. You
Relation.
have to align on certain things. So we're very much in sync when it comes to that. We're very selective about who we spend time with and who we allow into our home. So
Okay.
yeah.
So the next biggest mistake your husband could make with you would be failing to make it clear exactly who's in charge. And this could be around specific topics. In other words, you could have areas in, that you're in charge of. Um, with Laura, Laura has the same exact need, and in the kitchen, she's in charge. In other areas, it's like, you're not in charge, back off. But she needs to know who's in charge, and if she doesn't, she gets very uncomfortable and loud. And you're smiling.
It's just so funny to me. Usually he gets this right. But the other day we had a little I don't even want to say it was an argument, but it was late at night and we were going on a trip the next day and I was running around and I'm cleaning and I'm straightening up and I'm doing all this stuff and I wanted to vacuum. And he was like, you shouldn't do that right now because blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what it was. And that triggered me. And I just got so annoyed and I got loud. And he does not like when I get loud because he finds that to be, for him, when someone talks to him loud, it's disrespectful. So he gets upset when I get loud. So as I'm talking to myself about this, like, I can't believe he told me not to vacuum. Like, that's my that's my area. How dare him? Like, I'm in charge of vacuuming. So I'm just laughing in my head as you're saying this because yeah, like, don't come over into my area. Let's be clear about what you have jurisdiction over. And if you didn't want to hear the vacuum at night, just say, can you vacuum tomorrow? Because it's kind of late. And I would have said, oh, okay, no problem. Right. But don't tell
Yeah,
me not to vacuum.
right. It is about, and it's funny because this behavioral area is about decision making. By and large, these behaviors play out around decisions, but the 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 topic area of who's in charge of what is how it plays out in a relationship. If there's two of you in a house, there's only so many, there's activities and rooms, and everybody has, you in particular need to know, like you said, this is my thing. Don't you dare tell me what to do. It's my thing, is that
Right.
clear need expressing itself. Now, um, it sounds like what you said about your husband. So the flip side of that behavior is um, the need is either it can be collaboration, but it's usually when you said loud versus quiet, this
Mhm.
the behavior that people typically talk about with this is assertiveness. And so
Mhm.
just behaviorally, the clue is my voice is getting louder, and he's like, what's that all about? The,
Right. He
there's no
does not
reason.
like that. Right.
There's never any reason to shout.
Right.
And if you're shouting at me, I'm retreating from you. Um,
Right.
and passive aggressiveness is the so what Berkman actually found is what I started out saying is the Berkman research was why do we go into these stress behaviors? And Berkman found 9 stress behaviors around these behaviors we're talking about. Stress behavior on your husband's end of the scale is passive aggressive. So you want to treat me like that? That's fine. You see how you like that. You're gonna meet resistance every which way, and you won't know what hit you. It won't be loud, but you'll know that I'm angry, right?
Yeah, he gets quiet when I get loud. So,
Yep. And what's going on inside that head is there's never any reason to be loud. That's not my need. So
eh,
it can be a bit of a challenge because it sounds like behaviorally you're more assertive and he's less assertive. He's quieter, and
mhm.
he needs that agreeable, quiet, calm decision making.
Yeah.
But even if it's in an area of of your in chargeness, but he also should hear how important those areas are to you because that's a need, and our needs are not optional, by the way. That's the thing. It's like that thing that rose up in you, like, how dare he? This is my area. That's, in other words, that thought wasn't there the second before, but then it came all by itself. You didn't ask it to come. You just
Right.
thought it, right? That's how you know you have these needs. And so I always say you have to read the need. That is like, hey, somebody just stepped into my turf, and then you got to heed that need and say like, hey, my need was just triggered, and then you've got to relate it to your husband. You got to like, here's what it means to me what that you did that, and then you got to feed the need. It's like stay out, like with Laura, it's like I stay out of the kitchen, and when you're there I know it's like, I'm great in the kitchen but not when she's there because she's got to own it, right?
Right.
All right. So last of the biggest mistakes your husband could make with you would be this area Berkman calls incentives, and it has to do with um, rewards, what your expectations about who will get what, based on your contribution. And so on the lower end of this scale, this uh, set of opposites, there are people who need see the world through the lens of kind of teamwork and all boats rise together, and they'll kind of give one up for the team, and that kind of giving is part of that makeup. And then on the higher end of the scale, there are people who are more personal achievement oriented, who need to know that what's in it for them, and be sort of like very realistic negotiators. I'll do this if this is going to be the reward for this activity or behavior, whatever. So for you, you're on that higher end of the scale, and so one of the biggest mistakes your husband could make with you would be failing to follow through on a financial commitment that he made to you. Um, any promise that's made along those lines, you will be tracking that. You will be measuring that. Does that make sense for you?
Give me an example.
Well, if it hasn't happened in your life, if that's not ringing a bell for you, that probably means that you two are in sync. That when you negotiate about something like, I'm going to do this, it can even not be money. Like if you just say, I'm going to do this, you're going to do that, and that's a fair deal. Like
Yeah.
I'll vacuum, you clean out the camper or whatever it would be, or you go and take the kids to get new clothes or whatever it would be. But it's
Right.
the horse trading we do as couples is all about that. It's not doesn't have to be a financial commitment. It's more like business language. But in a couple setting we're horse trading all the time, right?
Yes.
And so some of it can be, I had a client who her husband was studying to be a doctor, and she said, I knew that when I signed up for that, there were going to be 10 years of me having to give more than I was going to get back. But
Hmm.
but our expectation was always that once he got through his residency and the whole thing, then there was going to be a lot more giving to me. But that's a very long cycle, and that's more like people on that lower end of the scale. But I would imagine that for you would be like you're there's a balance in your mind. I would think probably a fair amount of the time saying, is this a fair deal? You know,
Yes. Yeah, so I'm all about fairness, and we do um, operate on that system. So if we decide that we're going to purchase something, we talk about how we're going to pay for it. You pay this, I'll pay that. Or, you pay for dinner tonight, I'll pay for dinner tomorrow night, like whatever. So, yes, we do. And he is a stand up guy. So I never have to really call him out on, oh, you said you were going to do this and you didn't. That doesn't happen. But absolutely, if he says he's going to do this, I'm like, okay, I'm looking for it to be done. So,
yeah.
and if it's
So
not done, I am going to have an attitude because I know that he will hold me to my part of the bargain. So, yeah.
okay. Well, so we've gotten like all the way through the this report and your results. There were actually only two things not on there. Um, but and that was the area about structure and what else did we miss here? Offhand, I can't see it, but these are the ones that popped out as very clear needs for you, and big mistakes that somebody could make with you. I'll send them to you so you can have them. But what do you what's your takeaway from having done that kind of strange assessment where you were being run in circles, to having these results and having this kind of conversation about your relationship with somebody who's never really met you before, other than to have
Right.
general sense.
Yeah, guys, because I interviewed Chris, but I don't know him. Like, he doesn't know me. We don't have coffee and tea. Like, we don't talk. So he doesn't know Keisha. So I think it's very interesting. I'm really like so pleasantly surprised that the test revealed that detail about me and groups, and like that really, that's a good one because I don't know if too many people know that about me. I guess maybe my close friends, they know by now that like she is not into this whole big group thing. But yeah, I really love that it revealed that about me because I know that, and now it just reconfirms that's true about who I am as a person. Um, I liked it. And this just makes me know that, you know, I know myself, and me and my husband, we're doing pretty damn good. We've gone through the ups and downs of figuring each other out and learning how not to push each other's buttons, and how to communicate more effectively and just like be better to each other, you know what I mean, as people, and just listening to each other and fulfilling the needs that are there. So I love that I have this. I can't wait to share it with him. But I think we're pretty much on a good path.
Yeah, it's often the case that couples are, and life comes at you hard though sometimes, and so kids or family members getting sick, and these are the things. If these are hard lines for you, in other words, if these aren't met, these needs aren't met, all hell's going to break loose in a relationship. And so having, I always say to half the couples in the United States, half of all married people well, those relationships can end in divorce. And so you have to say like, oh, well, and you hear, and I've worked with couples for 10 years, and you hear the stories. It's like our first 18 years were pretty good. And then it's like, well, what happened? Well, you know, this kid got sick and my parents were aging, and it's the stresses and the pressures, and the next thing you know, then you hear these stories like they went over this boundary, they went over that boundary, and the boundaries themselves weren't clear and enunciated. And so you think, oh, as we've figured it out without the stress and without these major pressures, then people really know me. But it turns
Yeah.
out people don't really know each other unless these things are enunciated. But when you can, in my work with couples who've been in troubles, it's like people just go, "Oh, I thought that was kind of like that was maybe some of the time I needed to do that." And when you get these hard and fast, then your needs are your needs, and they are not optional. And it doesn't matter if you're in deep stress or not in deep stress. These are the things that you need to feel that your spouse or your partner gets you, loves you, has your back, whatever the term you would be, you would use. So yeah, they're pretty important to share. So I'd encourage
Yeah,
you for that.
I agree. I think so. And I think that a lot of times the foundation has to be there. And then you also have to be willing to do the work on yourself and work together, and say, what's missing here? What do I need to do so that something like this can actually work for you? I think this is a great tool. And I think that a lot of people probably need it because it's not only good for romantic relationships. I think this is great for just relationships in general. It's nice for people to know what kind of makes you tick and how they can, you know, fulfill your needs, in terms of just like, hey, if I'm friends with Keisha, I know that she doesn't need to be surrounded by a big group of people. I know that if I say, hey, do you want to just go to lunch, just me and you, she'll be totally cool with that. That making these crazy plans with 50 people and trying to coordinate all this stuff, like that's going to drive her nuts. So if I just have lunch with her, just me and her, she's going to really appreciate that. And we're going to have a great time.
Well,
So
it also gives you the ability to say, "Hey, I don't have endless social energy, and I get exhausted in large crowds. Please don't take that personally, right? It's just who I am."
yes.
Yeah, it's not that I don't like the group. I love the group, but I just get exhausted in a crowd.
And
And
I love that you defined it like that. Having endless social energy. I have low social energy, right?
yeah,
So I don't, and there are some people that have endless social energy. So that is great.
yeah.
That there's a term for that. And now I know and I can use it and be like,
And
sorry
I
guys.
think that's really the my mission is because it's interesting when you look at how we were raised as children that none of us basically when you're a little kid, you do what your caregivers want, you meet their needs. Don't talk back to mommy or daddy or the teacher. And so we learn all these lessons, but inside we have these needs, and as we mature, they are there, they're forming, but we haven't been taught to enunciate them to each other, speak them out loud, and to say, this is how it works inside of me. So you were saying like, oh, it's a big surprise that it saw this thing about me. Most people don't know this about me. It's because we're not out there touting. It's like just it's what's the logic of what's inside of us. So having the ability to say to your spouse or your friends, I don't have endless physical energy, I don't have endless social energy, or hey, that my feelings are really hurt. You're not really paying attention to my feelings. It's a big deal for me. My feelings are not optional. They're part of my mix. Like, I'm struggling and it's just me and don't take it personally, but I have to get those needs met or it's not all right with me.
Yeah. I love it, Chris. The more we know ourselves, the better off we'll be, the more at peace we'll be, and the better relationships we'll be able to have with other people. So I think that the work that you're doing is great and that you're helping people to discover a little bit more about themselves. So please tell everyone where they can connect with you.
You can connect with me at coupleswhisperer.com. Um,
Oh,
I've got this same report that Keisha and I just went through. The biggest mistakes you can make with your spouse or partner. I sell for two people, $179. The very first couple I ever worked with was a marriage counselor and his wife. Basically gave them the same information. They had been in marriage counseling for 20 years because they didn't know how to stop fighting. At the end of it, they said this was like getting 20 years of marriage counseling in a box, except it was even better because it helped us learn how to stop fighting. And they did. So these are hidden invisible things. Coupleswhisperer.com. I would love to send you this report. I've got actually I'll send it to you, Keisha, a very full-blown report that is kind of like the experience of talking to me, where I explain it in print and working on a video based course to support it as well too.
nice. All right, Chris. Well, it's been great. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to go live, and we
Yeah, we
finally
did.
made it.
Yeah,
So
we
I
did.
want to wish you a good evening. Have a beautiful rest of evening, and we'll catch up soon. And guys, I will be releasing Chris's interview this weekend. So check back on Side Talk for my interview with Chris to learn a little bit about how he does what he does, how he got involved with it, and it'll shed some light on everything that we just talked about.
Thank you, Keisha. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.